Rings. They're the source of one of the most iconic sound effects in video game history. Yet, if you ask most people for their origins, or what they even are, it's crickets. As in, about as many people who know about the game Sonic Cricket. But don't worry, that doesn't mean you're a fake fan. If anything, it makes total sense, because the Sonic franchise, especially the games, has rarely acknowledged the existence of rings outside of gameplay mechanics. Strange, right? We don't even know how Sonic stores them. At least in the movie, we know Sonic has a pouch for his rings. In the games though, it's up to your imagination. Now, there are different types, red, blue, and so on. But in this video, we're going to be talking about gold rings and their origins. So let's go through Sonic's long history to find some answers. First comes the basics. Sega created Sonic to be a direct counter to Nintendo's famous plumber, Mario. That's common knowledge, along with the fact that Mario goes around collecting his rent money in the form of gold coins. So naturally, Sonic games include golden rings instead. And these rings tend to be scattered all throughout gameplay areas. They're among the first things you'll see at the start of early games and are pretty much your lifeline, especially if you're not careful with your speed. They're one of the most forgiving mechanics in gaming. When you take damage, if you have at least one ring, you'll survive and be able to carry on, albeit with lighter pockets, of course. Once you're hit, rings scatter everywhere and you have a quick moment to pick them back up before they all disappear. Although, this only applies to normal damage. Not even Super Sonic can save you from being crushed or falling into a bottomless pit. In those cases, you're looking at either one less life or an outright game over. But speaking of that glorious golden form, it's easy to forget, but rings are also the fuel for Super Sonic. In the classic games, you'd need the Chaos Emeralds and 50 rings. Once the transformation is active, your ring count goes down bit by bit until it reaches 0, bringing Sonic's super transformation to an end. Now let's take things to the next level. The games also have giant rings, and they work very differently. If you're a fan of the Sonic movies, then this next part should sound familiar. The name itself gives away a lot, but giant rings are many times bigger than the standard ones Sonic collects in a zone. In the early games, giant rings appear if you've collected 50 or more regular ones. They bring Sonic to special zones where he'll have the opportunity to earn a Chaos Emerald. So, simply put, giant rings teleport Sonic and give him a chance at bonuses. The Sonic movies use rings in a similar way. They start out small and look almost like jewelry. Then they become big when used for teleportation. In standard Sonic gameplay, that's all there is to these rings. There are games like Sonic Unleashed and Sonic 06 where they're used for purchases, but that's about it. None of that explains what they really are or where they came from though. So for answers, we'll need to look beyond the games. The earliest answer comes straight from the Sonic the Hedgehog Bible. Now that might sound a bit crazy, but we're talking about the series Bible here, which is just the main document that everyone's expected to follow when working on a certain project. So things like who the characters are and the details about the world they live in. When it comes to Sonic, the series Bible was created by Sega of North America, while they worked on the first Sonic the Hedgehog game. Back in 1991, a Sega promo comic was created according to the Bible. In it, Obi Kintobor, a kind human scientist, builds a device called the Retroorbital Chaos Compressor. It used a combination of gold rings and Chaos Emeralds to absorb evil from the world. A detail that's not as random as it may at first seem, because this scientist is actually an early Robotnik. If you look closely, you'll notice that the name of this scientist is actually just Ivo Robotnik, spelt backwards. It turns out that while Dr. Kintobor was working on his machine, a lab accident caused by a spilled drink made it go haywire. All the rings inside of it were scattered, and the good doctor was zapped by 10,000 volts of pure evil energy, transforming him into the mad Dr. Robotnik. So in this early canon, we can see that the rings contained world-changing energy and were scattered wildly as a result of this accident. And after these events, Sonic went searching for rings to put the machine back together. And that right there is our first real explanation of why Sonic collects rings. What's arguably just as crazy is that in this comic, Sonic's fur was originally brown before later turning blue. Again, this was all made up by Sega of North America. It was later abandoned as an origin, so it's not canon, but it's interesting to see the first documented explanation. Another early appearance of rings was in the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon. In this one, they're blue. For reasons unexplained, and used for traveling through the special zone. Besides that, there's not much else. The Sonic SatAM cartoon made a stronger effort. In it, Power Rings are special golden rings produced by the Lake of Rings, which was created by Sonic's mustached relative, Uncle Chuck, using a machine powered by a mysterious power rock. Originally, the lake would only produce one ring every 24 hours, but this later changed to every 12 hours. They contain condensed energy that only Sonic can use. When Sonic uses a power ring, it gives him a temporary boost in strength and speed. Rings can also counteract the effects of Robotnik's roboticization for a limited time. After their energy is spent, their power fades, and they become useless until new ones are produced by the lake. And if you haven't seen the SatAM series, we really suggest you get on that. But man, these ring origins just keep getting further and further out there. And if you want to see further videos like this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel. In the Archie comics, Nate Morgan is the scientist who created the Power Rings. Using Chaos Emerald energy, Nate engineered Power Rings as a clean, controlled power source capable of fueling cities, technology, and even enhancing living beings, thus turning Rings into the backbone of Mobius's advanced society. That's the name of the planet, by the way. In fact, Rings even became Mobius's fifth element, but fearing their misuse, Nate later discarded the original ring production forge into a lake where it continued to generate rings in limited numbers, which made them a scarce and strategic resource. And this should sound familiar. The SatAM show introduced the concept of a lake of rings, and the Archie comics later revamped and expanded on the concept. Interestingly, Nate Morgan was actually a character intended to be in SatAM. His old design is drastically different, but it's the same man. Getting back to the Lake of Rings, it was eventually changed in a reboot to be naturally occurring water that produced rings all over the world of Sonic, which sounds much better. Something as powerful and magical as rings being man-made feels a bit off. At least we think so. But before we move on from the Archie comics, there's something really cool tied to Power Rings, and that is Ultra Sonic. Ultra Sonic is a transformation that Sonic was able to achieve using a large cache of Power Rings created by Nate Morgan. It first appeared in issue 66. While transformed, Sonic is surrounded by two energy loops that resemble the electron shells of an atom. Black stars also trail behind him as he moves. When Sonic first uses the transformation, Tails transforms too, but for both, the power boost is short-lived and leaves them wiped out. The highlight of this form is that it was used to defeat Naugus, triggered again by a large amount of Power Rings. Now from here on out, things get a bit more grounded. In Sonic X and Sonic Prime, rings work pretty much exactly like they do in the games. They're just there. Natural objects that protect Sonic when he gets hit. Unlike SatAM or the Archie comics, they're intentionally left simple. So even without explanation, you instantly understand what they're there for. Interestingly though, in Sonic X, Tails explains that rings are produced by Chaos Emeralds themselves. This lines up with the game somewhat, because it would make sense for the rings to have some chaos energy to them, considering they lead you to the emeralds and also fuel the supersonic form. It just makes sense. But out of all the explanations we've gotten in Sonic media, which do you like most? Maybe one day we'll get an official canon explanation shown in the games. For now though, it's up in the air. Thanks for watching.